here, Bob Baxter is the man. He has so much information, and if you come to our speaker series, which will restart in the fall, you can catch Bob again for something of that nature. And he's also planning to speak for State Park History and Culture Day, which is on the 15th. The first 6 state parks in Virginia were opened on June 15th, 1936. So, of course, without that, I'm just going to go to my scribble notes, and you just have to pretend that I'm your shoulders, because I don't want to waste your time. And my association with what I call TATC, but I understand you guys don't call it that, but I always call it that, is goes back to when I first started in 2021. And I have lots of pictures of you, but they are all pictures of your butt. Because when I'm coming to take a picture of you, you're digging, or you're cutting, or you're shoveling. So if you want good pictures, you've got to talk to Bill here to get some good face pictures. I don't have any of those kinds of things. So in the 3.5 years that I've been doing this, I have seen this group to be just instrumental for the park. Definitely reliable, coming when you say you will, but also offering to come and do more things and more things and more things. So it's just a treasure for me to have you guys available to come and do stuff. So what I wanted to talk about was a little, feel free, park history that goes back a few thousand years. So if you were there for Dr. Wisoker's presentation on the early geology of the park, he talked about the actual, see, this is where I wish I had a map, but you know how First Landing is, right? That kind of weird chunk of land that is there on the top right of Virginia Beach. The dunes there go back about 5,000 years. So before that, that was the edge of the ocean. And what Dr. Wisoker is doing, he's aging the sand dunes in the park with this process called luminescence, where they dig 5 or 6 feet down and they take grains of sand and keep them in the dark and then expose them to sunlight, and it makes a little electron shift and makes a bright color, and that's how they're dating the dunes. And if you're wondering, the oldest dunes are the ones on the Lincoln Bay side, and the newest ones would be over, of course, where the campground is. It's actually pretty cool. And if you go back that 5,000 years, you would find the indigenous Indians living in this area doing what they do, hunting and fishing and kind of almost a nomadic existence. So we'll jump forward a little bit more, closer to the 1500s, where you're going to find the Chesapeake Indians living in this area. I don't know about this area, because now we're in Norfolk, but in this general area, they were an Algonquin-speaking tribe, but they were not part of the Powhatan Confederacy. If you remember, how many people here were in 4th grade in Virginia? So, okay, well, Casey, right? She heard him give this speech at orientation too. So if you were here in 4th grade in Virginia, you learned a whole lot about the Powhatans, and you learned about Jamestown. But if you come from California, who here is from like the West Coast? A few people, not very many. If you're from the West Coast, you learned all about the Spanish and the missions and all of that. If you're from, the middle, you learned about the French and, fur trading and whatever it is. If you're from New England, you learned, of course, about the Puritans and the Pilgrims, and you got all that whole story. But here we talk about the Powhatans, and very few people know that before the Powhatans were here in this particular end of Virginia, this other tribe was there, which is given the name Chesapeake or Chesapeake Indians. And these people were here for hundreds and hundreds of years. They were not setting up town, village on that chunk of land that is now First Landing State Park. That was sand. Not great for having farming or anything like that, but great for setting up a hunting camp or a fishing camp. And if you think about what's out there now, it's exactly what was out there before. A lot of fish, crabs and clams, all different kinds of shellfish, There are nut trees galore up in the park, all kinds of berries today. You could find all the different kinds of blueberries there, but all kinds of things that the tribes would have been coming for. We know that when John Smith gets here in 1607, and you probably know that history, and if you don't, Virginia Company, this was a joint stock company. It was an investment scheme. This was not coming for religious freedom or anything like that. This was how to make some money. All these investors in London are putting in money to send these colonists over here to get started, with the idea that when the profits start rolling in, they're going to get rich back there in London. And the profits would have been coming from all these natural resources, you know, that they would be finding here, probably gold, right? Because, you know, we all knew about that. And also from opening up new markets for English goods. So if we can get a colony going, they're going to want to buy all those things that are being manufactured back there in England. So it's kind of a win-win, and because this was a private entity, the crown, you know, the king could give this charter for this land and not worry too much about losing any money on the investment, because the investment is coming from these stockholders who are going to do it and recruit these young guys to go over there and work, and maybe they'll get a little bit of land if they work hard enough. So you know what happened next, right? They take 5 months, they come over here, they land first out there where Fort Story is. And, you know, thank goodness we're here. Nobody died on the voyage except that one guy who died on that Caribbean island chasing a pig or something in full armor in the Caribbean. He didn't make it, but the rest of them, of course, did. And they open up the special box with the special instructions of what to do. Here's who's going to be your leader. It's going to be John Smith. What should you do? Go away from the coast and find a deep water harbor where you'll be safe from your enemies. Quick test, who was the enemy?
The Spanish.
He says Spanish.
Mosquitoes.
Well, yeah, you know, right? I know what happened to them later with the malaria and all that, but yes, it was the Spanish who they were worried about, because the Spanish had been trying to set up a colony as well, only in the last, I don't know, 100 years or so, even though they all were killing Indians. So the Spanish never did come, and they didn't really need all that heavy armor. So they settled up there in Jamestown, deep water. They didn't quite get about saltwater intrusion into their wells, and you know, the diseases that mosquitoes have, and then that whole starving time. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. When you were in school, you learned about the starving time when more than half, I think, of the colonists died that winter. But what I bet you didn't know is that starving time was due to a hurricane. Mm-hmm. So that fall, that late summer fall, a group of ships was supplied to come to Jamestown with settlers and food and supplies and all the stuff that they need, and they ran into a hurricane, and only the ship with the settlers arrived, and the ship with the governor or whatever, I think it was the governor, I think it was Lord Delaware maybe, and all the food and all the supplies, they got shipwrecked on this little teeny island out there called Bermuda. And they spent the whole winter rebuilding their boats because they were shipwrecked. And meanwhile, the whole winter, people in Jamestown were dying. And they sail up come into the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. The next spring, they're all excited. Meanwhile, the Jamestown settlers are on a boat. Literally, they met in the channel. They're escaping to go back to England because they had it. They're done, right? And Lord Delaware comes and says, basically, turn around. You signed a contract. And they didn't go back. And of course, here we are today, speaking English and voting for our elected leaders, which all goes back to Jamestown. So when John Smith gets here, the Chesapeake Indians are not here. They're already gone. And the story that has passed down through all of this time that he was given from the Powhatans is that one of Walking Songhawk's priests had a dream. A people from the east is going to come and destroy you. So, like any responsible leader, he sends his tribes, his warriors, whatever, to wipe out those people in the east, the Chesapeake Indians, rather than think further afield. Nobody knew anything about the Chesapeake Indians other than that story for a very, very, very long time. So the Powhatans are now here, the English are here, they start setting up settlements everywhere around here, Gloucester County and Hampton and Norfolk and all of these big, almost like plantations, these land grants are started. And let me see if I have a date here. Oh, by the way, nobody's building here for still at First Landing because it's not considered fit for agriculture. It's still considered this desert. So Adam Keeling, I know there's a road around here called Adam Keeling, right? He in 1770 is asking for some patents from the king to use some of that land. And the people around here are like, no, that's common land. We wanna, I don't know what they're doing, grazing animals on it or something. So it isn't until 1866 that the selling of these public lands happens, and they start selling pieces of it off to private citizens. And then we jump forward really far into 1930s when the Cape Henry Syndicate is formed. So these are local citizens who want to be sure that that land doesn't just get sold off into small farms, and they create this organization called a park and petition the state to take care of it and to take this land. And they donate 1,060 acres to the state of Virginia to make this park. Looking at my timing here. All right, so here we are. It's 1931. We've got this idea. We're going to have a park, but the world is in a depression. So building a park doesn't seem like the wisest idea, except that President Roosevelt says, I have a dream. Well, he didn't say that, but he said he had an idea. Anyway, he had this idea. He signs this law that creates all of this public infrastructure works by employing these men, sorry ladies, but it was pretty much mostly men, single men, young men.
You're now on the board of directors.
Awesome,
Free
awesome.
membership.
Alright, so I don't have anything really earth-shattering, but it's fun to look at pictures anyway. So that was the thank you. Show you, and now I have to figure out how to navigate things once you put everything in full screen. It changes everything. So how do I get it? Awesome.
Yeah, just say.
I gotta do this. So the idea of having this map in large size for you is to, Ian, I'll be looking at all this stuff, is to get an idea of, this has had to do with the geology part. I'm going to turn it just a little bit. So the canyons that your fishermen go out to, those are actually the remains of these rivers, the Susquehanna and the Potomac and all that. They actually would have been like that back when this was the shoreline, right? So this piece here that we know quite well, oh, now I'm getting it's all over the place, is where what Richard Whitaker said to me, what he thinks probably happened is that this land, because remember this wasn't here, right? These are the dunes that we're talking about, that it probably went out more, and then over time as the sea is rising, the sand is getting carried away and deposited, and carried away and deposited, and carried away and deposited. So these are the oldest here, and it goes kind of like that. There's also some indication that this bit here of, what do you call that?
Crystal
Lake, right?
Yeah.
That might actually have had an opening to the ocean at one time. So
I have a map
maps show that.
I have a map that shows that.
You do, yeah, I've seen that too. Now, you know, we're talking about maps that people made by jumping into a boat and going around, and that was gonna be my picture of how all I ever see of you guys are back. And it's always, probably the very first time I met, the Appalachian Trail Club guys, and it was a hot, sweaty work, and I just bowed out, in case somebody would ask me a question about tools or something, and I wouldn't have known what to tell you. And it's kind of weird why these don't, there we go. So this is some of those old maps that we were talking about. This one here is a map that is showing you what tribes were here as part of the Powhatan kingdom. So you've heard of some of these, you know, Nansemond and Chickahominy and Appomattox and all that. Some of these are now existing tribes. They have their own citizenship and their own relations with America, even though they're American citizens as well. But the Chesapeake Indians are gone. Either they were all killed off, or killed off many of the men, and maybe the women and children were intermarried. It's not really clear what happened. This is another old map that I really like. It's clear, but you can see here's where Lynn Haven River would be, and you can see it says right here Chesapeake. This is, I think, one of John White's maps. So pretty old map. This is Kecoughtan here. I can't read this. This is Nansemond, Mattanock. I think he was writing the names of the tribes. And then this is a 1952 U.S. Geologic Survey map, and the reason I like it is because it clearly says the desert. And when you look at it, this is clearly the trails as they were at that moment, but you can see that this was very much just nothing, right? And a little bit swampy in the low spots, and pretty much just was sand dunes. And then this is a 1900 picture of Virginia Beach in Norfolk showing the railroad that went straight out to here, and that's what began the development of Virginia Beach, actually, was having this railroad. Sort of like if you know anything about Palm Beach, and the Flagler Railroad, and how Miami and Palm Beach happened was because of a railroad. So this is a picture from 1908 of the main road to get out to Virginia Beach. So next time you're complaining, as you're going down, you know, the boulevard 264, just think about what it was like back then. This was just the sign that almost nobody ever reads because it's out there on the highway, and I think only the Tidewater Striders read it when they come to do their road cleanup. But it's just saying how on that date, the National Park Service, blah, 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 3,400 acres, June 15th, which is this weekend, it's National State Park History and Culture Day. And then there's a little mention of those, the naval battles out there, if you remember that whole thing with Rochambeau and, you know, that attempt to bottle up keep the English from winning. I don't know why that's doing that, that's kind of weird. Those you can't even see on this, so those are some pictures Bob Baxter found when he went to the National Archives of CCC workers. So that's a good spot to stop for just a moment to talk about the CCC. So, and I think I have a document here, how many people, did I write that down here? Well, I thought I did. I thought I wrote it down for exactly how many guys were involved. Maybe it's on here somewhere. Oh, look at that. Bald cypress. So next time you're out there, again, complaining about how bad it looks. So the Civilian Conservation Corps is building Skyline Drive. They're building dams. I think the Hoover Dam was a CCC project. If you've ever been up to the Finger Lakes up in Ithaca and down into those beautiful, beautiful parks and the gorges there, you're walking on these marvelous stairways and overlooks that just are fantastic.
that's all CCC work. And the idea was, we're in depression, people are starving, people have no jobs, how are we going to do it? Well, we're going to pay them, and we're going to build infrastructure. This is highways, this is parks, national parks, state parks, roads, all kinds of different things. If you start looking it up, you'll go down this marvelous rabbit hole of wonderful, wonderful things. And First Land State Park is known because not only were we one of the first 6 parks that were constructed with these CCC workers in Virginia, but the troops, they're called troops because it was kind of run like a scout program kind of a thing, even though these were young men, 18 years old, 20, early 20s. The troops that came to build First Landing were African American guys. So these are black guys from New York, New Jersey, and this was very, very controversial. Everywhere that this was happening in the South. The people who lived in the communities were unhappy with the idea that these people would be housed near them, or be on the same roads as them, or be in the same vicinity as them. You know, it was a very different time. The CCC workers that were here at First Landing, they had a sawmill. They cut down the trees and planed the boards, built the cabins. They built I think first they were in barracks at Fort Story, and then they built the barracks at the park as well. But they did all of the construction of those, the first buildings, which were at the oceanfront. Part of that visitor center and the store is the original that they built. The trails that they literally hacked out from the woods, not the trail center that's there now, of course, but whatever was there in the beginning. The first 6 cabins, what they call the superintendent's cabin, which I assume is the one that Bruce Widener is in, or one of those at that time. And they did a great job. The pictures here are just showing you their work conditions. This is just the dunes. So they're up there cutting all this brush down. There wasn't like thick, heavy forest, of course, but there certainly were plenty of trees and roots. This is a great shot of what is now the store and the visitor center, and that also tells you how close the water was compared to now. So if you are at the park today, you know quite well. So this would be like where the courtyard is, the amphitheater. They ended up building something like that. So you walk through that boardwalk to get out to the beach, and there's a big dune here. That's not there anymore. And the beach is, wouldn't you say, more quite a bit out. I believe, I think that, I know, it's really hard for me to translate, but my understanding is where the store is, and then the laundry room and the bathrooms, that way is the, built based on the original. So this is just a work detail. I do know that they walked everywhere they went. They did everything by hand. There was no in fact, maybe that's the answer to your question about why you can't bring your own tools for the minute.
Maintaining historical tradition.
Exactly. It could be it. At the same time that the park is rolling and now we've moved forward a little bit. This is actually right at the end of World War II. This is Seaview Amusement Park, which is at Old Great Neck. If you cross the street there from the gas station where, I forgot the name of those condos, Seagate. Right? So this is Old Great Neck here. This would be First Landing Auto right here. That's a sit-down maybe? It's whatever's across the street from First Landing Auto Care. It's some gas station, right? So this was a huge black amusement park because they were not allowed to go to First Landing State Park or any state park in Virginia for that matter. So all of the CCC workers, even had they had family right here in Virginia, they would not have been camping there or going to the cabins or using the beach or anything. It was totally segregated. This beach Dizzy Gillespie and put names of really famous actors and singers.
Louis Armstrong.
And Satchmo.
Louis
Right,
Armstrong.
all of them would be playing, they're just huge. So, the war's over, or going to shortly be over, 1945 around that time. And you see these black soldiers coming back to the States. Some of them, very few of them have medals, some of them deserve a medal, but didn't get a medal. Some of them have been wounded. Many of them have stood right there and watched their partners die in front of them. I don't know if you know about the 761st Tank Battalion. That's an all-African American tank battalion that was in Europe. They
liberated Auschwitz.
They liberated Mauthausen and Wilskirchen Lager and some really, really, really horrible death camps. So these people have seen the worst, and in Europe, they are lauded as heroes. They are dancing with the women in the streets. They're feted for just being, great people. And if you live in Virginia and you come back to Virginia, it's back of the bus. No, your kid's not in my school. No, you're not drinking out of my water fountain, and you're certainly not going to our beach. And that's when you see the protests begin and the petitions to change things. And it's actually really, that's about 1936. So hold on, let me move forward a little bit. I'm going to pull out that one. So at this point, I found this online. So this is the court case from it was filed first in 1951, and then it was refiled again after the Brown v. Board of Education. So these four folks from Norfolk, it's going to be their names down here, might be easier. Lavinia Tate, James Overton, no, that's the attorneys. Where is their names? I've got their names someplace. Anyway, these four people have petitioned the state to open up all the state parks. At this point, there's one state park for African Americans out past Richmond. I think it's today Twin Lakes. I think that's what it is. This is a very, 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 very long document. And what it says basically is Judge Hoffman's opinion that Virginia, the state, has done an unconscionable amount of work to refuse to integrate it to really ridiculous lengths. And the park was closed for 6 years by the state to prevent integration. And finally, when this decision comes down, they really have to open it up at that point. And unfortunately for Seaview Amusement Park, it doesn't last a whole lot longer, mostly because once everyone can go there, the profitability of Seaview goes down, and the owners decide to sell the land off and make some money that way instead. Okay, time expired. The only other thing I want to tell you is how great you guys are, and I actually brought you almost to the current day. So if you have a question, you can ask it. Otherwise, all right.
What were the 6 original state parks?
Oh gosh, I don't have that in my head. Sorry.
Hungry Mother.
Hungry Mother was one.
Dalton.
Doubt for sure.
Where else was there?
And
Pocahontas?
Westmoreland.
Oscar?
Seashore.
No.
I don't think it was Salisbury.
No.
I don't know. And if you're wondering about the name change, by the way, my understanding is that as we were moving to the 2007 anniversary, the 400th anniversary for Jamestown, there was a lot of push to make something about that history here, and the move was made to make the park into something to commemorate the first landing instead of just being seashore, which there are other seashore state parks, not very distinctive. First Landing is pretty distinctive. What was your question?
I need you to fact check something for me.
Oh,
I
yeah.
understand that in the early days, First Landing Park occupied what is now the amphibious base. And that during the Great War, the government, the Navy made an argument for needing it, but they would return it, which they have not.
I don't know about that, because what I saw here was that, we bought meaning the park, of course, bought this,
What about Fort Story?
over two
Maybe it's
thousand
Fort
acres
Story.
from that
Fort Story.
syndicate. Fourth Story bought 727 acres for World War II,
Okay.
and then we bought 60 acres back, meaning the state, back in, after the war.
Fort Story commandeered the land from the city with the promise that if they ever stopped using it for a military purpose, it would revert back to.
Wow.
was
And it almost got bracked until they made it joint base. And that's how they avoided.
But was it Virginia Beach City, or was it state?
Well, it might have been Norfolk County, but
Princess Anne.
Princess Anne County. Well, Princess Anne County.
Thank you, I
came
hope
from
that
Norfolk
was informative enough.
Well,
Yeah.
when somebody